when you write a book, and again, the master plan never involved a book, but it's hard to write with no purpose for 40,000 words. And so you have to really think deeply about a subject. And so as much as I wrote it to help people learn about this that maybe aren't, thinking about it as much as we are, I learned a ton writing it with the research behind it, with trying to put my thoughts together in a cogent way, which, by the way, I hired my daughter, who's at the time was a sophomore in high school, as an editor. And she's a really good reader and writer. I think she would love to be a Supreme Court justice in the future. So she's pretty serious. I think she really enjoyed making dad's pages bleed. But so I think that one of the things in that process, Josh, just to put a framing around it, is one of the things that happens is, we come at it often in the field from a senior housing perspective. I think many people, when they're trying to solve for place that helps them thrive, they're not coming from it from senior housing. They're thinking about what's the best place for me to thrive in the chapter that I'm in or going into. It may be senior housing, but it may not. And I very purposely made it not a senior housing book, because I talked much more about the good about living longer, and the science about living longer, and why purpose and social connection and physical well-being and financial well-being are so important, and place is foundational for all of that. And so if you're a consumer and you're thinking, I want to live a long, healthy life, you should be thinking about place just as much as you think about whether you're eating right, sleeping well, saving. Sometimes we don't do that. And I think that that's one of the takeaways. Another takeaway to think about is on how we think about place. It's not just our four walls. It's what neighborhood are you in? What metropolitan area? Are you urban, rural, suburban? What region of the country? What state? Our place is a composite of all of that. In some cases, your physical dwelling may be great, but your neighborhood isn't. Or, you love your metropolitan area, but you're not in a great neighborhood or physical, dwelling. And so there's a lot of elements for people to think about. When we play it into our field, more on the B2B side, I think one of the challenges, and I see this in the strategy consulting work I do with groups across the country, is that as the field evolves, as the boomers and the psychographic differences change for these consumers, we have to make sure that how we talk about what we deliver and what we build and operate really has the language and resonates with these prospective consumers and their families. And so we have to put effectively lenses on, so we see it not as the industry, but how does the world look like as a consumer? And I think that's where the book is. I didn't write it for that, but I think that's what's happened. I think that a number of leaders, CEOs, leadership teams, sales teams have purchased the book because it helps them, I guess, empathize a bit, to say, well, if I'm on the other side, how do I think about this? And of the different chapters, senior living is it's a short chapter, really. Actually, ironically, it was the hardest one for me to write because I knew too much in some ways. It was the one most edited, but I think it helps people say, what's my value proposition in this landscape? And also from an innovation perspective, one of the questions I think some groups are grappling with is, am I in the senior housing business, or I'm in the business of creating great places for older adults to thrive? And that you can get different answers when you ask those questions. Last thing on this, the question is that I've seen, as I mentioned earlier, in my leasing experience for the stores at Congressional Plaza, it's just that education takes a long time. And so if there's ways that consumers can get educated efficiently on their own time, I've seen that be valuable for some senior housing organizations too, because it's a unrelated entity writing about this, talking about the pros and cons of senior housing. But if they do work on their own and then they come back, they're more educated, they're a more informed consumer, and you tend to be more efficient then about narrowing a fit and kind of moving forward.